the test for how northern someone is what do you call a chip sandwich?
A chip butty.
Yeah, there we go. Right.
What would you call it, Carlos?
A chip
I thought it was
sandwich.
a trick question then. It's not a chip sandwich.
There's like 6
What is
different
that?
names for it in
Are you
different
talking
places.
about chips in bread?
Yeah.
Yes. So when you go to the chippy and you order a chip butty, like what's the bread called?
I've never ordered a chip butty before,
Oh,
but I
come
would
on.
probably call it a chip roll. I don't know.
I it's in Oldham where I'm from, it's called a muffin. So you want a chip muffin?
What?
That's what. Yeah.
We have muffins for like eggs Benedict. That's not a muffin.
It's not like that.
In South London, when Carlos is having breakfast with the Queen or the King, he has his eggs Benedict on a muffin. I don't know if you can relate to that at all, Will, but yeah, that's
Up north, I have a chip balm or a chip muffin.
Yeah. You're listening to the Offsite podcast with Jason and Carlos, where we talk all things construction and technology.
Join us for discussions with industry leaders and insights into the latest trends in construction.
Welcome back to the pod. Today, we are talking about site diaries, and we're joined by Will. Will is the CEO of Gather, previously Rail Diary. Gather, I guess, is one of the leading site diary apps in the UK. So we see it on a bunch of projects. Will's also a QS, so it means he's very knowledgeable, extra brownie points for being someone who actually understands the why behind these things. So yeah, great to have you on the show, Will. To kick off, so for me, there's few workflows on a construction project that happen as frequently as a site diary. So you've got the majority of a delivery team filling in these forms every day. Is this something that we do out of habit? But I guess the question is, why are they so important?
Yeah, good question, Carlos. And yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to join you both. So yeah, I am a QS, so this is probably from my perspective, but I've done this for a few years now. And for me, the site diary is traditionally a paper document, isn't it? We all see it on a horrible kind of duplicate or triplicate pad, but it's there every day. It's the who, what, why, and when. That's how I kind of explain it to people within our business and people within the wider industry. It's a record of what happened, and something happens every day, doesn't it? So we need to understand what happened, who was there, why were they there, what were they doing, and for me, it's understanding what we say we're going to do, and it's what we actually did, and more importantly, and probably linking back to you both from a planning perspective, why was it different? How can I learn? How can I improve? And that's why we need to do it every day, because not just because someone said 100 or 1,000 years ago we should fill in a site diary. It's about actually understanding, learning, and improving every day. That's for me is why it's there.
And if we think, so there's like the clear sort of, it's the record, and I'm going back to my QS hat here. It's
Yeah.
like a record of events with all the associated information with it. How do we actually, how is that information? So you mentioned there it's about improving performance, things like that. Typically, how is that actually used at the moment in terms of that information that's going back? Because I guess when I think about site diaries, a lot of them were paper-based forms. So what was the sort of status quo there in terms of using that data? Or is it just old school sort of, this is for claims and records?
I think Jason's got his hand up, but I can go first if you'd like. Very polite, Jason.
Well, while I've distracted you, I'll add to Carlos's question. How about that? And then
Okay.
I'll put the hand down. So
Okay, thank you.
I think like in general, if you were to ask the average person in construction on a project, a lot of people say we need to do a site diary. It's super important because it becomes a record. At some point, we're going to need a record, like just leaving the record of what happened. Is that the sole value of a site diary, or is it important for other reasons than just we wrote down what happened on site? And if we ever need to go back and demonstrate what happened on that day, we've got it written down somewhere. I guess, I think the question that Carlos might be getting to, or at least what I've hijacked, is, what is the true value of this site diary process that everyone spends so much time doing every day on projects around the world, really?
Yeah, I think traditionally it's as you explained it. Like it's about just having a record in case something happens, in case something goes wrong. When I was a QS and working for Balfour-Beatty, 18-year-old, worked away at London, it was all records. That's literally what I got told every single day. And my first 2, 3, maybe even 6 months was just filing records. making sure we had a record for every single shift, every single project. And it was that just in case we need it, just in case something goes wrong, just in case there's an issue. And they're often just sat in a lever arch file, which sits in the project office or goes back to head office when the project finishes, and it's just in case. And that's the very traditional approach. And people would dust them off and use it to deal with claims. But I think that's changed. I think that it's had to change because we can't just carry on using the site diary as a reactive thing. And certainly what I've seen over the last 2, maybe 3 years is it's a proactive tool. And that's probably going back to my opening comment about it's about learning and improving, because what's the point in just doing something to sit there and never actually opening that record until something's gone wrong. And that's kind of what I used to do. I used to like get the record out and go, this isn't very good. It's filled in paper. I'd ring up some poor person on site and say, you're not giving me this information. It was 3, 6, 9 months ago. And they wouldn't remember, but now it's having that information on a daily basis, I think is really important. And yeah, everyone does it. Let's make it easier. Let's make it a bit more useful.
Yeah, 100%. If we think about then like the status quo, right?
Yeah.
So on a construction project right now, we're going to see a spectrum from like handwritten diaries through maybe words, sort of forms, and maybe up to sort of a piece of technology like Gather. Um, it's really underwhelming given the importance of a site diary. Like it's this record that protects you against claims and future like risks. Why do you think the bigger software houses have actually sort of not tackled this or put a lot of focus on this?
I think we've kind of fallen into the trap that we can just put the site diary in with just forms that we use on site. We've kind of just banded it together. I was with a bigger software vendor yesterday, and they kind of grouped it under HSQE, or health and safety and quality. And I was like, I don't really think it sits there. Maybe that's because I'm a QS and that's my background. But for me, it's a commercial document, it's a commercial assurance tool for all the reasons you just talked about, Carlos, and protection and understanding and improving. It drives productivity, doesn't it? How do we get better every single day? So I think people haven't tackled that because they've just thought, okay, I'll just build a form. When I started Rail Diary, as it was 6, 7 years ago, I walked into the office of Paul, who's our CTO, and said, take me this Excel sheet that I built. It's amazing. It's the best spreadsheet ever. Put it on a tablet. And I learned in about a week that the best way to enter data is not actually in a table. Like that's how you read data and interpret it. But we're asking people who are there to deliver a job to use a table and put some numbers in some words. And that's not actually a great experience for them. And they reluctantly do it, and you get poor quality records, missing records as a result. So I think people have probably wrongly banded it into, we can do this in a general site form. We can just make it up. But actually, when we think about it, we need to think about that person on site. I think if you think about that, for me, it's like a person on site in high vis, in the pouring rain, somewhere in middle of nowhere, 3 a.m. How do I make their life easy? And that's probably what we've not challenged and addressed as an industry.
So yeah, if we think about like, right, site diaries are massively important. They can protect us from when something goes wrong, or if we've got a
Yep.
dispute, we could theoretically use the data for all sorts of things that could drive business value.
Yep.
My experience from previous projects being on the ground,
Yep.
and you tell me whether this is what it looks like. You know, you're probably looking at a million site diaries all the time. The current status quo for the average project feels like there's some crappy form somewhere that's, you know, someone has to fill out. The person that has to fill it out is sometimes like right at the bottom of the food chain. No one wants to do it, so they keep delegating it down until there's no one else to keep delegating it to. And you end up in this situation where there's terrible user experience. The person filling it out is so far removed from the actual value of what this thing is for, which it could be a commercial claim, it could be a safety thing. And someone has to do it and just does it and writes stuff that might not even be relevant to protect you against that thing. Side note, we used to have to do this back when I was a site engineer and have to do the site diaries to prove that no one ever read them. We had this chap on night shift who for about 6 months was taking photos of his boots and other random things around the office and attaching it as his site records in the site diary. And that went on for like 6 months before someone opened one of the diaries and just looked at it and went, what are you doing? So it's a terrible experience. It gets pushed right to the bottom, but it's so important. It seems like a weird misalignment and a problem, that means that unless the person that is doing it understands why it's important and gets some value out of it, they're always in this spot where they'll be inconsistently done. The information won't be what we need. Is that what it looks like on the ground today for the
I,
average
I, I
project?
I think so. And on the way in this morning, I was thinking, how many construction technology tools do we have where we rely on someone who's so far removed from the kind of the value? I can't think of many others, if any at all, that other than the kind of site diary process. And I think sure anecdote there's the spot is it's this black hole of information, isn't it? Like that person on site, we're trying their best to give you the right data, but it's just into this black hole. And you only actually get a phone call from an angry QS like me or Carlos when something's gone wrong and we've not looked at them for 3 or 4 months, and now we need the records desperately. So I can't think of many other processes that on the construction site that where that happens because you look at your project plan every day, you look at your financials on a daily or weekly, monthly period. Records you only get out really traditionally when something goes wrong, and that's not good, is it? You can think about that person on site. There's no feedback. There's no say you've done a really good job. Keep sending me more photos like this. This is excellent. They usually just get the the, the sharp end of when something's gone wrong, or why have you not included this? Why have you not included those photos? And that's a horrible oral experience, and that's why you get crappy records as you described because there's no incentive. So what I think we should do, and what I'm trying to change, is that feedback every single day, good or bad. We should tell someone, "Thank you, record's really good. Like, thanks for that. Keep giving me more photos, or can I have more photos of the excavation, or whatever it needs to be." And that's how you'll get that feedback. That's how you'll improve the quality of those records. You can have the best tool, the best user experience, but if that person's not getting feedback from their peers, then they're just going to give up, aren't they? So that's what I see as the status quo at the moment. That's what we're trying to change.
Yeah. Side note, I didn't intend to go into this, but
Thanks.
from a software design perspective, in so many of the consumer tools we use, there's these little moments that that reward you at little
Yeah.
increments along the way. You get like a lovely little inbox zero moment when you finish. You read whatever it is, and I've never seen a single one of those in any of the experience that I've ever had to use doing these yeah, site diaries. Well, actually, just so many of the forms that we had to fill out in construction. So I think that there's lots of cool ideas that brings up.
Yeah,
And
what's that aha
I
moment?
feel,
That's that bit to delight you. Yeah, do you know what I mean? There's none of that. It's just yeah, I'll send it off into this black hole uh, and then I'll see what comes back if anything. And like your friend who said his boots every day. Do you know what I mean? It proves that no one was looking at it. So
but
yeah, that's really important.
by the way, I kind of sanitized that story. It started as boots and then got worse and worse and worse. At one point, it was like photos of like different subcontractors on site being like, "That person's useless," and he would like write it on there. It was yeah, it got
Got out of hand.
it got out of hand. Yeah.
At least they weren't first surfaced like in court or during a claim or like dispute process. That would have been a bit
Well, I think
difficult.
that's the only reason someone went and actually opened the things, which is the problem with right. Like
Right.
Exactly.
someone's doing
Yeah.
this for 6 months, and then someone goes, "Oh, damn, there was an issue, back in July or whatever it was." Goes in there and goes, "Why are there photos of boots in here?"
Exactly. And
Yeah.
like you just lose all the value, don't you? Because it just becomes nonsense, poor quality, and it's so unfair on that person on site. And I think going back to your question, Carlos, why the bigger vendors not tackle that problem is because we often sell them to people, decision makers, people who've got hold the budget and making tools for them. We're forgetting on the person we actually expect to deliver these projects. And I think that's where we need to change.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite difficult because you guys typically like you would probably your way in would be through the commercial team who are the budget holder and the people sort of driving this record. But ultimately, you're asking the entire delivery team to put a lot of time and effort into something that doesn't directly give them any value, but it does give the commercial team value. Now, so more than just a record, um, obviously with paper-based diaries, you couldn't really do anything with it because it lives in a lever arch file, as you say, and it gathers dust. What does a good site diary workflow look like now that we do have like apps in place and we're gathering this information?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And there's two things probably for me is probably the speed and the quality. Those are how we kind of look at it. Like, So I think the speed, just to go back to that user experience, like when I was at Balfour BT, paid people an extra hour a day to clean a shift records. They do it by hand. We knew it was important. It was still wasn't very good. And for that person who's extremely busy, they're doing long shifts, they're outside, they've got lots to do. It's got to be quick. It's got to be easy for them to do. So regard that workflow and how quickly they can do things is super important. We've tackled that in a specific way by just pre-populating it. So how much of the record can we fill in before that person walks out on site? For us, it's I think 64%. So all the planned works, all the resources meant to be on site, what time we're meant to access the infrastructure. So all you're asking for that person to do is say what actually happened, who actually turned up, how many machines we did, how many quantities of X or Y have we done, get me some photos of it. So it shifted that kind of perception of this is a document you need to fill into. This is a workflow as you described it, and say, right, this is what I'm planning to do. Tell me what actually happened. And I think that's where you get the buy-in, you get the quality and the consistency, because everyone can tell you how much they've done. Do you mean I can tell you I've done 40 meters of this? I can tell you that these 10 people turned up on site. Like having to work out the plan, you just get planned 100%, done 100%. And that's where we need to move away to. So for me, the workflow and the quality of a site diary includes kind of where we're working. It's the who, what, why, and when if we go through that. So who was on site, labor, plant, materials, captured in a consistent way. So I can use that information. So I can say, right, Jason's done 30 shifts this week. And I've always spelled Jason's name the same way because Jason's got a profile and everything goes with it. I've got my plan and I know what my output, what my excavator's working time is, how much standing time it is, because I can use all that data. Same for material, what was on site, what was delivered. And then going back to the progress side, and probably where this comes kind of hand in hand with Afex, is understanding what we plan to do and what we've actually delivered. So we plan to do 100 of X. We've done 50, well, which 50? And give us all the detail around that. And then the other thing I think we miss is an allocation. So an allocation of labour, plant, materials. Traditionally, separate duplicate pad again, but that's kind of the secret sauce that brings it all together. So I've got who was on site, I've got what they were doing, for how much they've achieved. But let's allocate their time to that, because we can use that for short-term substantiation when something goes wrong, claims, all the stuff we talked about. Isn't that even more powerful when we learn about it? So next time I'm doing this activity, I know what resource is required. I know what my average output is per day. I know what the risks are likely to face because I can see all the things that have been delayed. So allocating our resource against activities is a thing that's not traditionally in a site diary, but I think is the most important thing, and it's how it brings it all together. Hopefully that's answered your question. That was a bit of a long answer.
Yeah. So like a good outcome starts with something like a really robust capturing experience that
Yes.
yeah, that captures that who, what, where, and what was the last one? Why?
Why and when? Yeah.
Why and when. Got it. And then um if you were to take that even further and go, what does great look like from the business? What do you see as how businesses get the most value out of that workflow, whether it's something they're doing now or something they could be doing?
I think for a lot of the kind of more progressive businesses and our customers that are really pushing the boundary, I know, Carlos, you posted about this before, is kind of real-time CVRs, understanding cost and value together, because we have that record straight from site. We know what its costs. We know the value it's generated because we know what the activity. So that's the next step of the workflow. How I can use that to say, right, we plan to have 20 people on site. This is what we've actually got. Why was it different? Have we achieved more? Have we achieved less? And it brings kind of commercial teams who are traditionally maybe work at home these days, but are away from the delivery team and delivery teams together, because it brings
Thank
that kind of
goodness.
not.
Right.
Well, it does, doesn't it? It does, because traditionally you go end of the month and go, we've overspent, we've not achieved what we thought we would do. Why? And then you'd point the finger at the delivery team. What if you could have that discussion collaboratively every day or every week based on the site records, not waiting for the end of the month to the period end reporting. You're actually looking at your program, what's actually happened on site and the cost with it. So I think that's where we're really pushing the boundaries, and that's where we need to get to, because when you get to the end of the month and the period, the opportunity to do something about it's gone. So let's do it every day and bring those people together, and not just have commercial teams sit in their ivory towers. And I was definitely guilty of that in the past, and actually talk to people that are out there delivering it.
And do you see the idea of even going further than that and any contractors using that data to build up their production rates for tendering the next job, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. Like if you were to continue on the kind of claims theme, we've seen people use site diaries to kind of substantiate measured mile approach to substantiating production outputs, which is quite detailed. And we traditionally use kind of other projects. Well, what if you could use your own data to kind of estimate what that should have been? But then, yeah, next time I do this project, I know the delays I need to price, so I can use my site diary to create a risk register. The next time I do this project, I know all the risks I'm likely to face, and then I've got production outputs, I've got resources that are required to do it. And you can start to see where you can optimize things. If a 10-person gang delivers X per hour and they cost me that, whereas a 5-person gang delivers Y, what's the most efficient way of doing it? My background's in rail, and we start to see that to when you optimize in possessions or occupations so taking over that infrastructure for a limited amount of time. What's the most efficient use, gang size? How much should I be planning? Should I do one foundation or two? And all that sort of thing is where you learn. So, and you can only do that if that person on site gives you proper structured data. So you need to keep looping back to that. But yeah, that's where I see it going, Jason.
And then one of the things, because this is a conversation that I've had a number of times with different contractors, literally as recently as today with a tier one in Asia. Okay, you've got this source of these records that could be generated from a really robust site diary workflow. One of the tricky things is that's not the only source of like records or actuals for a project. There's usually like delivery dockets. Sometimes it comes in on invoices. So there's all these other potential sources of these actuals that could either like if you're doing the site diary and you're taking that data, you could theoretically duplicate that data and incorrectly measure it. So how do you see, either now or in the future, properly bringing those sources together?
Yeah, it's a good question. The example you've used around delivery dockets is something that we've looked at over the last 12 months and been really popular. How can I take that delivery information with the materials that are actually used on that particular activity and even feed that back to kind of finance? So matching it with the purchase or the invoice that has come from the supplier and actually what was done. So yeah, that's about construction technology really putting like kind of working together, playing nicely, isn't it? And how can we make that information so it's easy for you can feed it back to your ERP system, whatever you're using for financing, your ordering system, what you're using to kind of understand the carbon impact of those materials, all that kind of good stuff. So I think that's about data being consistent, but then technology companies like ours playing nicely together, like understanding that data transparency, be able to give them other systems the right format of data, the right quality of data, gives that contractor that you spoke to this morning that whole picture, because someone might have missed something. Do you know what I mean? And it'll be captured elsewhere. We're not trying to duplicate things; we want to deduplicate things, but it's good to have that kind of catch-all as well.
Earlier, you sort of mentioned about obviously performance. So, like for example, you could understand what you're burning every day on a construction site in terms of labor part materials. That have your customers thought about like performance of, say, supply chain? So, for example, you could know yesterday that X subby didn't provide labor on 6 sites, which is then like actually quite a big red flag for a potential issue with supply chain or like a certain type of material and things like that. Is that where the customers are going at the moment, or is that a bit too sort of
No,
broad?
it's happened. I've seen it happen with client organizations where they've given similar scope to two different contractors, NEC option E contracts, which clients are usually a little bit kind of nervous about. It's like
Cost
open checkbook.
reimbursable.
And yeah, exactly. Like, let's just crack on and spend as much money as possible. And, well, it's not like that, is it really? It's about delivering value. So we've seen it on projects, and this was a cable installation project where the first contractor was delivering, let's say 100,000 meters, and they were averaging £2.50 a meter. And then the other contractor was delivering at £4 a meter. Like you start to understand where people are efficient, where you're getting value for money, and you increase the scope or you give them more work because they're so much more efficient. And you start to question the second contractor. And what we saw on that job is one of the contractors actually not given any more scope after their initial scope, whereas I think the first contractor are still working on the job. They've been given more and more scope because they're so efficient. So that's where I see clients trying to drive value for money, and just be transparent. You could do all that now on a traditional paper record if you really wanted to. It just take you a long time to work out and do that. But having real time value and production metrics makes you understand, and as a project, as a client, as a contractor or subcontractor, where you're efficient, where you're not so efficient. And I think that's something that's missing in construction at the moment, that visibility. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's absolutely where it needs to go.
was talking to someone from a client organization the other day, and their plan in the future is to pay higher per meter the quicker you do it. So you're really incentivized to just smash through and you're paid more. And obviously you'd then command a higher fee. So yeah, I do think there's that, particularly on the materials front. What are we actually installing? Because the old option here, which is basically we'll pay your cost and give you a fee, you're just not incentivized to do anything at any pace, really. So yeah, okay, that's interesting.
And
Sorry,
also we
Jason, you
call
look
that
like you
more
need to say
delays,
something.
more pays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no incentive, is there? It's crazy, but yeah, if you know you're going to get more scope, do you mean more fee? Then you're gonna be as efficient as you can and be rewarded, hopefully. So yeah, that's where I see it going, certainly in the UK.
Well, can I just take us back to a previous question to double click on it before moving forward? The idea of this, like, okay, I've got these records coming in from delivery dockets from subcontractors, and I've got folks doing a site diary with some allocation or recording of hours or recording of materials. How do you see that working? Where does the site guy have to be cognizant of those records and pre-populate them, or do the team just kind of know that we don't need to record concrete because concrete comes in via dockets? How how integrated and like seamless do you see that working at the moment, and then maybe how do you see it working in the future?
At the moment, it's probably two very separate processes, teams like you've described. They don't probably talk to each other even. Do you know what I mean? I'm the store person. I get them deliver the materials. For me, I want that all that information to be on the site diary. I want that report. I know what was delivered that day because it's just part of that story, isn't it? Like, why did we not achieve the amount of foundation we thought? Say, well, the delivery of concrete didn't arrive until 2 hours after we thought it would be, and here's the docket that shows that that was the case from the delivery driver. So it's just part of that story of what happened that day. So for me, we want to add the delivery dockets and other similar information as part of your site diary, either captured directly in it or at least appended to it as a link back to maybe the tool or software you're using to capture that information. But for us, we see a lot of clients in the UK capturing delivery dockets on their shift record or site diary every single day because it is just part of that story, because material is so important. I see so many project delays when things have turned up late, maybe the wrong material, wrong mix, to use the concrete example, whatever it needs to be. It's just part of that narrative for why we did or did not achieve what we thought we could do that day.
Yeah, yeah, cool. At risk of boring people, I won't ask follow-on questions, but I have a long list. The if I was then to like go back to what someone listening to this might be interested in hearing. So, okay, we're on an infrastructure or some sort of construction project today, like $100 million or tons. Our site diary is done in some spreadsheet or wherever. It's almost, it doesn't matter what the tool is. It gets inconsistently filled out. You know, we do it in spits and spurts. The records in there are not like they're just someone wrote an essay or put it under the seat of their car or whatever. What would you say if you were like on that project or you were working with that project? What are the like, what would be the steps? What would be the practical steps to get to like one of those good or great outcomes of, you know, making site diaries something that is actually valuable and consistently used?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And one of the first questions we ask a project like that would be, how many records are you actually expecting every day, every week? And you'd be surprised at how many people don't know. I don't know how many records I should have every single day. And we kind of start there, like, are you expecting 10? Is it 100? And you should know that because you should know how many teams you're doing, who's reporting, and just making sure that's really clear. And then that's how we measure kind of that rollout, get into that kind of success point is, have we got 100% of the records? And once you do that, you can start to improve the quality further, get the feedback. But we see projects with so many holes in their kind of record keeping process and not being clear what the responsibility is. That's where we start, because like if you're watching this, like how many records should you have on your project today? Do you know? And not many people do. And yeah, the tool and Gather takes care of the quality element to a degree because we lock it down, the workflow is structured. But we need to understand what we're measuring against. Is it 100 records, right? How do we get to 100 records? And that can take not that long a time. We worked with a tier one contractor on a £100 million job last summer. We did that in 30 days. They got from not having any records on Gather. It was on paper. It was on Excel sheets. The particular project, and I won't go into it, is they literally had so many paper allocation sheets. The graduate QS had bin bags under his desk of allocation sheets. I went to their office, and this is a big project, and I was like, "Are you not worried the cleaners might just take them out tonight and then put them in the bin?" Like, he just had bin bags. It was crazy, and going from bin bags to having 100% of your records in 30 days, I thought was pretty crazy, but it's quite easy to do when you just understand what I need to do and have the right tool. But yeah, moving away from bin bags, and that is a true story, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned,
Carlos, yeah,
yeah, you
Carlos, you were going to
mentioned,
say something. Sorry. Oh, nailed it. Go ahead.
done it twice. There we go. Um, so there's obviously like this clear problem of like complete records and records from the right people about like full coverage of the works. And you mentioned, I think you said 64% you can pre-populate in the diary. How close to 100 can you get? Bearing in mind, like thinking about like technology that can gather or capture information. Do you think you can get
Yeah,
to 100 or close enough?
probably don't get to 100 because we still want that narrative. You could probably use other tools to get the more objective things in, quantities and things like that. But a lot of the gold in the site diaries when someone explains something, we ask them to categorize it and say, what pot does that fall into? Why was it delayed? But the real gold still comes from someone saying, right, it was the reason why we didn't do that work was a material issue. Well, tell me a little bit more. Like, I need to know what the material issue was, and you might have the dockets that go with it. So we're never going to get to 100% because we still rely on that person's experience. They're there to deliver the work. They know how it should be delivered, and tell them what's blocking them. And that's where I see, and you can use technology to help that. It's like we all have it on our devices, but speech to text is just so popular on sites because when I go and see training sessions, when people roll out Gather, we encourage kind of people on site to rant into their phones, just moan at the app and tell us what's gone wrong and give us that anecdotal evidence. So yeah, I'd love to get to 100%, but I think we're missing out on that kind of good stuff that happens. And yeah, and that's only when you explain. And like free text is a nightmare. I want to lock that down as much as possible, and bring in quantities, calculations, categorize things, drop down menus, all those kind of simple tools. But once you've done that, explaining it in kind of free form is what you need to do.
Well, I just want to say something you said right at the start. We are talking about how so much software, including site diaries in construction, is like designed for the benefit of someone sat at the top that gets a report and some sort of output and has very little consideration for the person rewarding the person that's got to put the information in there is something I bang on about consistently. And there's this like saying when it comes to like social media, how like the user of social media is the product and not the customer. And I think there's so much of that in a lot of construction software where the person that actually uses the software every day to do whatever the workflow is the product for the person that's going to get the report. I think you can't fix any of this unless you break that model for sure, and give value to the person that actually does the thing every day.
Yeah,
Totally
couldn't
agree.
agree more. Yeah, when I started Rail Diary, I was all about give me the best dashboard report, and adoption was like through the floor. We were struggling. Emma, who was our product designer at the time, she was like, "Well, we just need to focus on the mobile app. We've seen so many people just use tablets, and probably 6 years ago, phones were a bit smaller, so tablets were quite popular. Now we see it's kind of the other way around, but it just lets us focus on that person on site. Like they're the person. Like all these fancy reports, all the other stuff is easy if we can get that right. And that's where I think we need to focus on that person. And you make the experience easier. You make it quick because they're busy people. They don't want to do this because they're there to deliver. You make the process of them getting feedback a normal occurrence. Like I can't remember when I was on site, how many times did I actually go and say thank you to someone and well done. That was a really good site diary. And maybe that's just me as a person, but I don't see that happen on construction sites really. I don't see that. It's always when something's gone wrong. Like why has that happened? So I see that positive feedback loop being another way to kind of break that cycle you just talked about. And that's something that we're constantly working on and we haven't got right yet. And I don't think anyone's got that quite right yet, but I think we all need to kind of work on how do I tell someone they've done a good job or point them in the right direction when they've not done. So that's what we need to get to.
Yeah, well, mate, thank you very much. I think this is a really important workflow. I think there's so much of what people are trying to do at like a higher level, whether it be AI or analytics or getting reporting across the business, starts at like getting the right data captured, and a diary is like tip of the spear in my view. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us, mate.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good chatting to you both.
Thanks, Will.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers, Jen.